This video does not claim to teach anything, but aims to share some reflections and concepts I've developed over several years of study. Today, we're talking about the classical guitarist's left hand, the one responsible for pressing the frets to form melodies and chords. The fingers of this hand must press the frets, but also move smoothly along the neck. There are two types of techniques for the left hand. The first suggests that the fingers should press each fret and remain down. In other words, these are semi-fixed positions that change each time you shift to another position, also semi-fixed. I like to call this technique the fixed finger technique. The second draws inspiration from the piano technique, where each note is played with one finger pressing at a time. After playing a new note, the finger that played the previous one is lifted. In this case, the left hand is less stable, but not necessarily less precise or fast. We'll call this the free finger technique. Before going on, we need to clarify a few concepts. The first is, how can we define a technique? By technique, I mean the set of routine procedures on the instrument that help us develop the ability to tackle musical pieces and complex passages. This implies that the technique used during exercises must be the same as when playing repertoire. The second point concerns the physiological functioning of the fingers. The hand is naturally developed to open and close in order to grasp objects. These movements are made possible by two main types of muscles, flexors and extensors, which in the case of the arms originate in the forearms and extend to the fingertips. To minimize fatigue, it's necessary to maintain a movement that best utilizes the hand's opening and closing, avoiding excessive bending or stretching at the fingers or performing any compensatory movement, such as overcontracting the biceps during a shift. Once these concepts are clear, we must ask ourselves, what is the best technique we want to develop? We tend to notice that when passages are easier is when we play them slowly. Instead, if we speed up, we perceive the passage as more difficult. The reason lays behind a basic principle. If we want fingers to move from one fret to another, we must perform a fluid motion that leverages the opening and closing mechanism. At speed, we often fail to complete the full finger movement, so we push harder, compromising the initial motion and compensating with micro-movements that stiffen the muscles and alter the finger's naturally curved shape. It's common for such added tension to manifest in the biceps or in the phalanges of the fingers. Pressure. It's now a well-established principle that to move fingers quickly, muscles must be generally relaxed. Overcontracting the arm and the forearm muscles increases pressure and results in stiffness. This stiffness is directly proportional to the amount of muscle and effort applied. In other words, the more rigid we are, the slower our fingers will move. For example, let's play the first 4 notes of a chromatic scale on the first string. Then another 4-note segment on the 5th string. If we apply the fixed finger technique, the first one, the first note has pressure level 1. The second note, pressure level 2, since 2 fingers are pressing, the third, pressure level 3, and so on. That means that the pressure quadruples when the little finger is pressing. When the pinky comes into play, it's time to shift. This requires releasing a large amount of pressure, and in the short time available, the index finger also needs to switch strings to press the first note of the next sequence. This situation isn't ideal, Because, as we've shown, the index finger has little time to reposition correctly. Moreover, we often compensate with added tension to move quickly. So, to summarize, in a very short time, we must 1. Release pressure. 2. Lift the finger. 3. Reposition the finger on the new string. 4. Press it. If we used the second technique, the pianistic or the free finger technique, the situation would be different. When pressing the first finger, pressure level is still 1. When pressing the second, instead, the first finger is automatically lifted, and so on. This way, pressure remains constant because there's only one finger pressing at a time. But there's more. By doing this, the index finger is already free to move and take its new position on the 5th string, at least from the moment the second finger is engaged. Lifting the index finger as the middle finger presses the second note of the sequence gives us more time for the shift. At this point, the index finger can calmly perform the 4 steps mentioned earlier and ensure greater security in the movement. Active training of the extensor muscles. In my opinion, if we want to develop a solid technique, we also need to actively develop our extensor muscles. It's important to consciously control the exact moment when to lift the fingers to prepare for repositioning. Let's take the usual chromatic scale exercise. We lift the index finger from the string at the exact moment the middle finger presses it. And at this point, we can choose to place it on the next string, either when it's the ring finger turn or when the little finger comes into play. It's best to decide the sequence of fingers during the practice routine to execute the shift effectively. In essence, we must consciously decide and practice the movements of the finger extensor muscles rather than leaving them to chance. This way, results will certainly improve and our technique will advance. By extension, if we take the C major scale as an example, we can think and achieve the same result, but that's a story for another day. In conclusion, we have demonstrated that if we use the fixed finger technique, keeping the fingers down during the shift, we'll always have a little time and the movement would result forced due to the extra tension we introduced. So the faster we go, the less time we'll have. On the contrary, if we train the free finger technique by lifting the previous finger as soon as we play a new note, we will give more time to the finger that must press the first note of the new position, facilitating the shift.